Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. We apologize. We had some technical difficulties this morning that we were definitely not expecting, so we apologize. But thank you very, very much for being here. We're very excited to welcome our guest speaker today. So as usual, what I'm going to do is just very quickly, since we're a little behind on time, I want to make sure that our guest speaker has the full time that he needs. I just want to say welcome. Excuse me. I'm Patty Robinson, Faculty Director of Civic and Community Engagement at College of the Canyons, and I'm joined by my colleague and co-host, Kimberly Rosenfeld from Cerritos College. And we are here today leading another segment of Civic Dialogues, which began in 2020 through a Bringing Theory to Practice grant and then has continued on for almost 4 years. So we're really happy that we're continuing to be able to have this presentation go forward. And at the same time, this recording, or this presentation, I should say, is recorded, so it will be uploaded to the 3CSN YouTube site. Again, what we've tried to do here is to bring many of the top scholars and researchers and practitioners in civic and community engagement from around the country to this venue and basically introduce the California Community College system to the work that's being done nationwide. So rather than go into more of the presentation that we typically do, I'd like to go ahead and we're going to get it started here by introducing our presenter, Bob Frigo. And Kimberly, if you'd like to go ahead and read the bio, please, that would be great. Or I have it as well. You can still, we apologize. This has been a hectic morning with the tech.
I was just trying to unmute myself. I'm so sorry, everyone. I was trying to find my window. Here, I'm ready to go. I can read the bio. Bob Frigo is the Assistant Dean of Campus Life and Director of the Kernodle Center for Civic Life and an instructor in the Department of English at Elon University. Frigo holds an MA in Irish Literature, wow, from Queen's University, Belfast, and an MED in Student Personnel Services from the University of South Carolina. He is responsible for providing strategic leadership for a comprehensive vision to support civic life, community-based learning, and community engagement at Elon University. Welcome, Bob, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Patty, thank you for the invitation, and thank you to Kimberly and Patty for helping organize today. It's great to be here. Technology is not always our friend, so I certainly appreciate that. It's great to be here with all of you. Welcome from Elon University here in North Carolina, on the far side of the country. I'd love to have a conversation with all of you over the next hour, and so I'm going to share some content with you as we think about where higher education is going, the roles that we can all play in our respective institutions, and I would appreciate some conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and get things rolling slide-wise. So I'm going to pull my information up. And I know that once I have my slides up, it's a bit hard to see the chat. So thank you in advance to Patty and to Kimberly for assisting with helping monitor the chat. All right, can all of you see the first slide? All right. Patty, I have my slides up. Could you give me a verbal yes if you can see the first one?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so today's conversation is entitled Harnessing the Transformative Power of Higher Education to Advance the Public Good. We'll have a discussion about this topic, and I'm going to share a bit of a model for some things that we're doing on our campus that may be able to be replicated elsewhere. So to get started, let's think about some big picture questions. As the value of higher education is being called into question across the nation at the present time, how can we turn our institutions towards the North Star that is the public good? How can colleges and universities play a role in creating a more just society? So I'm going to leave those up there for a moment for you to think about. Those are rhetorical questions, but they're designed to frame our conversation this morning. So let's go ahead and get started. I want you to think about this initially. When you think about the idea of the public good or the common good, I want you to think about how, if you are teaching at the present time, I know that we have instructors as well as administrators on with us today. want you to think about, how does your class contribute to the public good? So currently, think about what you are teaching. And I want you to think about, on a broader scale, how does your class contribute to the public good? And I'd love to open up the floor for some conversation so you can share some ideas and examples with us that may inspire others. So how does your class contribute to the public good? And feel free to unmute yourself and just share a thought.
So Bob, I'm going to jump in here for just a second, because I suspect that some folks might be going, public good, what exactly does he mean?
Great
So I'm
question.
wondering if maybe you can kind of frame it a little bit first. And then I think, because most of the folks that we have who attend our series, they are not coming out of civic and community engagement per se. They're interested in the topic. So I think that might be a really good starting place.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you for that frame. I really appreciate that. I want you to think about this. The classes that you're currently teaching, how might they contribute to creating stronger communities or a more just society? How are they affecting, beyond your students, how are they affecting your local communities? How are they affecting your state? How are they affecting society in a bigger way, perhaps? So if that might be a little bit of a helpful frame. Thank you for that question, Patty.
I'm going to jump in. I teach communication studies. And so, I think of this question on two levels. I think of, I've got my course content, right, which is the course outline of record and the things I need to cover. But then I also have specific assignments that I think are trying to, and I think both are getting at this. So depending on what kind of comm studies class a student takes, let's just take a basic public speaking class, for example. We are teaching how to have dialogues, how to think critically, how to look at hot issues in society from multiple perspectives. And, I think of even argumentation and persuasion, where we argue them from both perspectives. But I think most importantly, too, is sometimes you can frame activities that help students, whether that's project-based learning or a form of service learning, that gets them out into their local communities around topics that maybe they're researching in class, which I've done plenty of times in my public speaking. So they're giving speeches not just based on library research, but actually becomes more textured and more alive when they've been out in the community. Like usually it's a social problem I'll have them give a speech on. And so they work with an afternoon with that population or with that issue. So I do think from both of those directions, I would like to think my classes contribute to the public good in giving some fundamental training and how to think and talk about some of these hot social issues. So.
Okay, wonderful. Kimberly, thank you for those examples. Fantastic. Anyone else have things to share? I think Kimberly really kicked us off and got us started.
Hello, my name is Delbar Shabazz, and I'm part-time faculty at College of the Canyons, and I teach art. I believe that art, it connects people. I can see that. I've experienced it a lot, but I'm not sure in my studio art class how exactly, like directly, it is connecting with other communities. But my hope is that each of these students at the end or in the future can be representators for creating a community by sharing a common language, which is art. But that's not right now. I'm not sure how, I mean, there are a lot of ways to connect with other departments, but it's not happening in my class, at least.
Okay, Delbar, I'm glad that you're here today, and thank you for sharing. What it made me think of, the reason I got involved in this work about 15 years ago is that I used to work at a college of art and design. And I was talking to a faculty colleague who taught in the graphic design department. And so he was having his classes put together logos and publicity campaigns for fictitious nonprofit organizations. And so the conversation we had was, in the city where we were, Why couldn't his class be working with local nonprofit organizations that couldn't afford to have a new logo or publicity campaign created? So I think there's a lot of possibilities as we think about connecting art and classes and communities. So thank you for getting us started.
Thank
So
you.
good. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So a number of you may be doing this. And so Kimberly shared some great examples, but here is where we could be going with this. My next question, as we're moving forward with my slides, is I want you to think about how could your class contribute to the community? How could it contribute to broader society? So I want you to think about the courses that you're currently teaching and the courses that you may be on tap to teach in the fall semester. If you think about taking your existing course and perhaps you add a little bit of a tweak to involve community organizations, those could be nonprofits, local schools, government agencies, local businesses. I want you to think how could your class maybe contribute to the public good? How could your class involve a community in the future? And what could that look like? So take a moment to think about that. And I love to hear from one or two people about how your existing class could possibly do this in the future.
So Bob, I'll use an example
That
to
would be
kind
great.
of get people thinking about this.
Okay.
I don't teach I haven't taught for a very long time, but the work that I do, I work with students constantly, but in different capacities. And one of the things that we've done is we have an action team. And our action team several years ago, it was in the 2020 election, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
We had our students, and this is outside of the classroom, so more of a co-curricular kind of work, or not extracurricular, but in that capacity. We had our students go over to our local homeless shelter, and they were registering clients at our local shelter. And not only were the clients incredibly grateful to be able to register, but we were able to work with the Bridge to Home shelter in Santa Clarita, which then could provide a physical address that allowed these individuals to then be able to have access to a ballot. So that is just one example of how we did this, not in a classroom per se, but again, getting that connection to a community site.
That wonderful example. Patty, thank you for sharing that. I'll share another example. We have some folks in a class involving the philosophy of food. And so one of the programs that we have on campus is that we work with the dining staff in our local dining hall, which is downstairs in my building. And every Tuesday night, we will harvest produce from a farm that we have on campus. And our local dining staff will contribute some protein. Often it's chicken. And they will also contribute some rice and some pasta. And so every Tuesday afternoon, we have a team of students that prepares meals for our local homeless shelter. And those are cooked and prepared and stored. And the next morning, they go out and they take them out of the fridge, they deliver them to that shelter. And so those will either help support either the lunch or dinner that happens at that shelter every day. So because we have this volunteer opportunity every semester or every week here on campus, we then bring classes to connect with that opportunity. So students in that class have an opportunity to prepare and serve those meals. Again, as we think about the idea of food, we think about ideas like food insecurity. We connect those students with that volunteer program, which is then connected to a nonprofit that runs our local homeless shelter. And students get to see what food insecurity looks like on the ground, but also to start to think about some viable solutions to address the 13% of folks who live in our county who are food insecure. So as we go forward in this presentation, and as you leave here today, I know for us it's spring break next week, and so that gives us a little bit of blue sky time to think about some things. I want you to start to think as we go through our conversation today, how might you involve your class with these kinds of opportunities? to help create some hands-on opportunities for students. So I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So as we move forward, I want to think about some bigger picture ideas right now. New York Times Magazine back in September this past fall had a piece that came out that talked about the fact that Americans are losing faith in the value of college. And ultimately, we started to ask, whose fault is this that Americans right now are rethinking how valuable college is or is not for people? And so we start to see some trends in some areas where we see that data is also in sync with this. And so there was a Gallup poll that was put out last summer. And I'm going to go ahead and move the slide down just a bit. And it talks about Americans' confidence in higher education. And so that Gallup poll had captured snapshots from Americans in 2015, in 2018, and then in 2023, last year. And so as we start to take a look at the confidence that people were asked that they have in higher education, in 2015, we saw 28% of Americans, almost a third of Americans said they had a great deal of confidence in higher education. In 2023, that went down to 17%. And so we start to see from 2015 to 2018 to 2023, a decreasing level of confidence in higher education. So let's continue to look at some of those ideas. We start to take a look at who that involves. And so as you take a look at this shifting confidence, you start to see shifts from, again, 2015 to 2023. Those who identify as Republicans in 2015 had a 56% confidence in higher education. That really dipped to 19% in 2023. It's a 37% change. We see Democrats going from 68 down to 59. It's a 9% change. And then we start to look at men, we start to look at women, but across the board, as you'll see on the very right-hand column of percent changes from 2015 to 2023, every one of those categories, political party, education, gender, and age, every one of those demographic groups had a decrease in their ability to have confidence in higher education. So where does that put us? The Pew Research Center a couple of years ago gathered some similar public opinion poll data, and their piece was entitled "The Growing Partisan Divide in Views in Higher Education." And so as we take a look at the Pew data from a few years ago, we start to take a look at the percent saying that colleges and universities have a positive or negative effect on the way things are going in the country. On the very left-hand side of our page, you take a look at the graphic for those that are Republican or lean Republican, and folks went from 53% in 2012 down to 33% in 2019. You take a look at the middle column, those that are Democrat or lean Democrat, that stayed consistent, 67%. If you take a look at all adults on the very right-hand side, you're going to see a dip from 60% down to 50%. So we keep seeing these levels of concern that have really changed over the last decade. Here are some of the reasons identified by Pew when they were gathering data. Number one, 84% of adults are sharing the fact that tuition costs are simply, they're too high. Second idea is that students are not gaining the skills they need to succeed in the workplace. They may be excelling in the classroom, but what about those skills that they need to be successful after they leave our classes? Third, too much concern about protecting students from views that they might find offensive. About half of the folks who chimed in had that to say. And then finally, professors bringing in political and social views into the classroom. And everyone's in a different place when they are in front of the class in terms of sharing ideas, sharing views. I will tell you personally, I teach an English class every fall. One of the biggest compliments I think I've ever had at the end of a semester is I had a student named Jack come up to me and he said, "Professor, you have to tell us in the last day of class." And I said, "Jack, what do I have to tell you?" And Jack said, what I want you to tell us is we have no idea where you are politically. Could you please tell us in the last day of class because we can't figure you out? For me, that was a compliment that I was presenting a variety of points of view in that space. My idea was to solicit ideas and opinions and ideologies from my students and not to share my own from the front of the classroom. Now, everybody handles that differently, but for me, that was a point of pride. But as we think about why are there partisan gaps and why higher education may be heading in the wrong direction, those are 4 concepts put forward by few. So we can go ahead and think about those and perhaps how we play a role or not in those. I'm going to go ahead and skip this one. So as we think about the concerns about decreasing value of higher education in the present time over the past decade, as I shared some of this data with you, I'm really curious just to hear 1 or 2 folks chime in. What are your concerns about this? How does this resonate with you? And where do we go from here? First time you've heard this, maybe not. But what are your thoughts when I share some of this data with all of you about the public perceptions of education at the present time? Love to hear a thought or 2. Crystal, I think I see your hand up, so you can go ahead and chime right in if you want to unmute yourself.
Right, thanks. I don't think I'm particularly surprised by this. I think that these are things that we've heard just sort of like in the air. I think it's really, I think it's wonderful to see this, like see the actual data, and I haven't heard why, but I don't think I'm particularly surprised. I mean, we live in such a deeply polarized culture right now that even talking about just being a person and creating equitable spaces is political, right? So it's hard, right, to talk about how to, for example, align with the code of conduct and to treat our students with respect and kindness without sort of bumping up against these ideological perspectives that didn't really even feel like ideological perspectives at one point in our lives, right? It did feel like a political perspective, but now things are so highly politicized and so highly divided and so highly polarized that it feels like there's nothing that you can say or do that doesn't bump up against that. So I am curious about how it is that you navigated that, right? And managed to maintain an emphasis on respect and kindness, but also did not, and also somehow, sort of like made yourself seem apolitical or without political views. Because it seems to me as though even saying we have to be nice to all of our students, including the ones who are disenfranchised, is already a political statement, right? So not surprised, but definitely thought-provoking. And thanks for bringing this to us.
No, great points. Other thoughts on this? I don't think a lot of folks are going to be surprised. How does this sit with you, knowing that this is the profession in which we find ourselves, that public perception of the institutions where we happen to be at the present time? Folks are losing faith. How does that resonate with you? What are your concerns about that?
I'm going to jump in because, not surprised, but very concerned. I do think I see the data is over like the last decade. We know that social media has a role in this. I mean, there's lots been said and some studies done that there's this polarization happening with our filter bubbles and other things. And I'm wondering, like, where do we go from here? One of the things I think higher ed needs to do is some really deep reflecting on where the mismatch is between, I value a liberal education over vocational, over anything else. I think that's the foundation of all. But within that liberal education, I do think we need to have more concerted efforts around misinformation, partisanship, propaganda, the world that our students live in beyond our classrooms are profound and they're different and they need a different kind of sensibility and training that I think higher ed has a blind spot right now with.
Yep.
So that's one thing I think of, and where do we go from here? Now, tuition costs, you know, that's an ongoing, I think, struggle, but I don't think that's anything brand new, right? Paying for books and paying for school has always been for a lot of populations very difficult. And I do know that I've seen some legislation coming through trying to address that, and that's very encouraging, but that's also partisan.
Yep.
And that's also blocked and fought over. And, you know, I think we're just in this highly, highly polarized environment where now higher ed has been pulled in ways that we haven't seen before, at least not in my career, where, you know, how we like to entertain both sides of issues, but we have now speakers canceled at certain institutions and others being protested. And now we have, you know, these international conflicts, and now we're centering the university on whose side are you taking. I mean,
Right.
it is a new world, and I do think that maybe higher ed has some reflecting to do and really needs to think through this differently. And I'll stop there.
Great thoughts. No, I appreciate those thoughts. All right, let's go ahead and keep moving. I'm going to present some ways that we can all address this institutionally as well as on our level as well. So let's start to think about what that might look like. So I appreciate those last few comments. There was a piece, and this actually came out in my hard copy of the Chronicle last week, and it's from Scott Carlson. It talks about what's really behind the view that higher education is no longer worth it. And so as we take a look at this, Carlson puts forward a few things that we could do to help improve the outcomes. And I drill down on some language that we're going to start to talk about that really talks about how community engagement, civic engagement in our classrooms at our institutions perhaps could help turn the tide. Carlson talks about the fact that some of the solutions may involve how can our institutions, how can our faculty make more connections with community organizations that can offer opportunities for students and incorporate more hands-on learning outside the classroom. How are we bringing community into our classrooms? How are we bringing in nonprofits in local schools, government agencies, locally owned businesses? How are we bringing those folks in to collaborate with our faculty? And then how are we getting our students outside of their classrooms? How are students having hands-on experience? Working on site at local nonprofit organizations, working in local schools, working with local homeless shelters, working with local government agencies. How do we start to bring community in? And then how do we start to move students out? And so what could that look like on a micro scale as well as a macro scale? There was a publication that came out in the spirit of the Chronicle of Higher Education back in the fall. This is about a 50-page publication. It's a little pricey. It's about $150. I was a little bit shocked, but I'm going to give you all a little bit of a snapshot in what is in this piece. It was entitled "College is a Public Good. How do we start to make a better case through community engagement to help address some of the data that we've looked at and we've talked about so far today?" So as you take a look at what this publication starts to share with us as faculty, as administrators, we start to pause and say, zooming out, as Kimberly challenged us to do, how do we ultimately look at our institutions as stewards of the public trust? Okay, so much of our teaching is focused on students in those classrooms. So much of our research is focused on faculty at our institutions and faculty elsewhere. We have a significant inward focus. How do we start to move outward and have a more of an external focus to connect more with our communities, with our counties, with our state? Section 2, it starts to talk about the idea of partnership, about colleges as educational partners. So we'll drill down on that in a second. We start to look at colleges as financial drivers. What are we doing in terms of our communities with the educational opportunities that we're providing, in addition to the employment opportunities that we're providing? Often our colleges in our respective communities are some of the top employers. We're bringing students in, we're helping folks who are owning apartment complexes, who are owning houses, local restaurants, local businesses. Our institutions are having a significant impact locally on local finances and the local economy. How are we talking about that? And then we talk about colleges as community partners. So we'll drill down on that in a bit. So as a bit more of a sneak peek in this publication, we start to look at how colleges and universities can be innovative in partnering with their surrounding communities. And in the process, how do we start to rebuild that public trust that we've seen as being lost, especially over the past decade? Some of the things that we need to keep in mind, from our classrooms to our chancellors and our president's offices. Why partnerships with community groups and employers succeed best when they're reciprocal, not when they're paternal. Ultimately, our goal is to create mutually beneficial partnerships between our faculty and our community partners, our administrators and local elected officials. When we think about a faculty member, when we think about, let's say, Kimberly's class, the idea is she may be working with a local nonprofit organization. And the idea is she is not just taking from that organization. They are not just providing a learning experience for her students, but where's the reciprocity? Perhaps when Kimberly asked that nonprofit organization, how can we help you? What are your current needs that we can really look at in terms of connecting with my class? Maybe you're designing a survey for that organization. Maybe you're helping them create or update their website. Maybe you're providing student volunteers to help with their local Habitat for Humanity site or an after-school tutoring program. So ultimately, we're looking at a reciprocity and mutual benefit between the institution and the community. And so those reciprocal partnerships are the gold standard that we're really shooting for. We start to think about how can our institutions serve as quarterback organizations? How can we help coordinate goals and strategies and investments for a community? What could that partnership look like? We then start to look at how can our institutions protect their financial state by helping improve surrounding neighborhoods. I'm just up the road from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and they have done some amazing work with neighborhood partnerships as they help to create more affordable and sustainable housing in the area around campus. And what does that look like? We also start to think why more colleges can really emphasize the idea of lifelong learning and strengthening our ties to K-12 schools. What does job training offering that we could be doing? Could we be offering non-degree credentials to help meet the needs of local economic needs? One of the things as we think about K-12 schools that my university is thinking about right now that I think is really exciting is that when I think about local school boards across the country, the last data point I heard is that about 70%, and that may be a low number, of individuals elected to local school boards have no education experience or background whatsoever. Could our colleges be providing training and support and resources to newly elected officials that serve on local school boards to help prepare them and train them for those challenging positions so that we can have stronger public schools near our institutions and across our states? So how can we help connect our institutions with what's happening locally? As we start, and actually I'll pause on that next thought. So I want you to think about this as an idea. How can community priorities be connected to your classes? The first thing that I'm going to ask you to think about is, do you know what the needs of your communities are? And the idea is a fundamental question involving community engagement, civic engagement. When we are working in partnership with community, one of the first things that we should be doing when we build relationship is asking, what are your needs and what are your priorities? Too often, universities and colleges like to tell our surrounding communities what their priorities should be based on the research that's coming out of the work that we do. But we need to be humble and we need to pause and ask, what are those community priorities? One of the things that we have in my local county, which is Alamance County, is that every 3 years, our county health department puts out a health assessment survey, and they share those findings every 3 years. For the last 2 health assessment surveys, we've had the same 3 community priorities, and those that have emerged are access to health care, education, and economic development. And so what we have been doing in an office like mine is illuminating those community priorities. When the university is thinking about new initiatives or new possibilities, when faculty are thinking about connecting with local nonprofits or schools, when we're thinking about research and funding opportunities, we are reminding people, let us pause and look at what has the community told us are their priorities. And we think about things like access to healthcare, education, and economic development to use those community needs as drivers to our programs and to our research and to our teaching. Other things that we could be thinking about is ultimately how can our institutions better understand these priorities and work towards mutually beneficial partnerships. Okay, our goal is to be mutually beneficial, and we don't just have to wait for those in our president's office to drive these conversations. On a campus like mine, and this is happening across the country, this is happening on the faculty level as well as the administrative level. Our faculty are deeply engaged in communities, and so they're involved in local organizations like Habitat for Humanity, like the Girl Scouts, in local public schools, and they're making individual connections with individuals in those organizations, and they're connecting their teaching and their research to involve what's happening with community to what's happening in those classes. And then as you think about conversations that you have with your institutional leaders, and I'm really curious to hear if any of you are doing this right now, ultimately, how can we offer incentives to faculty like all of you to change a little bit about what you're doing and incentivize faculty to do more community-based teaching and scholarship? I'm going to pause right now. I've given you a lot of questions and information, but do any of your campuses right now or your departments, do any of those places offer any incentives to help you engage with the community in terms of your teaching and your scholarship? Would love to hear if there are any examples out there.
So Bob, I'll jump in with this one from our perspective on our college. Certainly we have, when I say we, there have been a small group of us that we have tried to provide some faculty professional development to get, faculty interested in this kind of work, as well as we're just trying to launch this semester a course that's actually focused on community engagement, civic learning, as well as project-based learning. Unfortunately, no one has signed up for it. The other problem with this is that when you talk about incentivizing faculty, we do not have the extra funding, and I'm trying to be very careful how I state this. Unfortunately, people will say, yes, it's a great idea, but there isn't that little carrot, if you will, that can actually help get this launched with faculty, because faculty are already so stressed or stretched across, the work that they're doing. And the other issue is that how do we show that the institution is supporting this if there isn't that institutional kind of buy-in or support? And that's been one of the things I've heard constantly. If the institution isn't willing to provide a little bit of release time or a small stipend, why should I be doing this? And I know that sounds very negative, but this is sort of the reality of what we faced.
Yeah. Thank you, Patty. I appreciate you sharing that. Crystal, I see your hand up.
Sure, yeah. I was just going to echo what Patty said. There's no service learning on the vast majority of our campuses, and certainly not on mine. And there's no incentives for faculty to reach out and work with the community. Sometimes we have faculty who do, right? But that's sort of on one's own free time, using one's own unpaid labor, right? But I was thinking that there are opportunities through, the strong workforce was strengthened a lot in California a couple of years ago. And so there have been opportunities, increased emphasis on working with local employers, right? So I do wonder if there might be some opportunities there to build in some service learning around strong workforce as a way to increase employability of our students. So I do wonder if there's ways in there, but these conversations are happening. Everybody talks about how wonderful it would be, but nobody's raising their hand and volunteering to do it for free, and nobody's volunteering to pay them to do it.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Crystal. I'm going to share a couple of things we're doing on our end. It's interesting. So we used to have a very small number of faculty who would want to dip their toe in the water to do this. And so we call them the usual suspects. And so we started to bring them in the fold, and we started to allow them a little bit of a tiny budget. Could you have coffee with folks that are thinking about doing this? Can you share how you do this and why you do this? And so we started to say, how do we expand our circle? Some of our faculty who tend to be our younger faculty are coming out of experiences from their undergraduate experience, from their master's or their doc work, and they've done this as a part of their work before they got here. So when they get here as a new faculty member, they've already done this from the student perspective, and some of them want to continue to do it from the faculty perspective. And some of our faculty say, listen, I couldn't not teach like this because it's so enriching. My students tell me that we're designing actual materials for clients. We're actually working in concert with folks in local schools. And so there's an energy about that. But I know how much work it takes. A couple small things that we have done. I have a small budget that we have started to do, where at the end of every semester, I have a list of what faculty are doing this. And I have a group of students in my office who write a brief thank you note, and we offer them a modest gift card. And I know it's not a course release. I know it's not a full course stipend, but it's a way to acknowledge and thank you for the work they're starting to do. We have a small grant that comes from an external foundation. And so what we've started to do is put a fund together where faculty can apply for funds that come in. This is external funding, but we manage the grant. And so you can apply for up to $1,000 if you have a partnership with a community partner and you need materials or supplies or transportation funds. And so our faculty, while that's not going out to pay those faculty, it's giving them some project money for those opportunities. Lastly, one of the things that we've gotten really big traction on is that I have a faculty fellow for community-based learning. And so our provost office, and there's one for leadership on our campus, there's one for community-based learning, there's one for sustainability. And so faculty put their name forward, and you interview for this possibility where you get a course release every semester for a 4-year term. And the idea is I then work with that faculty member, and they are designed to help prepare and work with other faculty members thinking about doing this. So what does this look like on a small level, from thank you notes and a little gift card to coffees to how do we start to have faculty fellows? So I'll offer a few more tips as we go along. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. This is also what I want people to think about. How can our institutions communicate the impact of us working in conjunction with community in a way that's heard by the people, by elected officials as well as voters? How can we create a strong case to say, this is how our institutions and our classes are helping advance our local communities, and this is how our communities are connecting back with our institutions? How are we getting those stories out? How are we sharing that data? What does that look like? Are we putting it out there? I know we decided, we got so much feedback on my campus that we weren't doing this enough. We hired a student writer. I have a student in our communications department. We're offering her 5 hours a week, and I got a little bit of funding to do that. And that student's job is to interview our faculty and our students in our community engaged classes and our community partners as part of these to start to share these stories. And those stories then get around campus and our community to start to share all these amazing things that are happening that used to be kept under a lampshade. So that one student writer cranking out 5 hours a week, she's doing about a story or two a week for us. It's starting to generate the kinds of things that could be possible. And again, sharing those stories. All right, so we're moving along. One of the things that Patty and Kimberly asked me to think about is, as you think about Vision 2030, the roadmap, the strategic plan for California community colleges, I had a chance to take a look at some of those documents, and some of that information that I'm pulling out, I want you to leverage. And I'm going to share a little bit about my strategic plan in a bit, and I reference it all the time. And I use it when I'm asking for resources. I use it when I'm asking for people to think about how they're using their time in the classroom and in research and in our communities. As you take a look at your strategic plan for your California community colleges, some of the language that is applicable that you may start to lean on talks about raising the awareness and the impacts of climate change. We see that in a variety of places in that document. We start to talk about working through community-based organizations to bring workforce training to low-income adults. How could your classes perhaps play a role in that? We start to talk about some language at the bottom. How do we bring colleges to communities and online education? Again, how do we move beyond our walls and our spaces to bring what we do out to communities? And so I want you to take a look at the respective strategic plans that you have for your system and for your institutions, and look at language that would involve community in some way, shape, or form. And I want you to start to lift that up, because I start to do that in the spaces that I'm in, because we've already agreed to that and printed that. But then I ask people to be accountable for our language, and how do we put those things into motion? When I took a look at the College of the Canyon strategic plan, there is some really amazing work that's in their 2023 to 2026 strategic plan. And I'm not sure how much Patty had a role in convincing colleagues to add some of this language, but I want you to think about, can you place yourself in positions where, as your respective institutions start to create their next strategic plan, can you have a voice? Can you have a seat at the table? Can you think about being able to add some of this community-based language to the plans, which then may impact funding and infrastructure? And so as we take a look at the College of the Canyons plan, they've got a wonderful mission, vision, and philosophy. When we start to drill down into that, when we think about the vision, we start to take a look at some of the language in here. Some of that language involves fostering a broad range of community partnerships. That is baked into the vision, okay? How do you hold your institutions accountable once that language exists? In addition, College of the Canyons has a really great paragraph that focuses on partnership with community. It is very clearly stated that their intention is to create relationships for the foundation of success for current and future partnerships. And they identify local schools, colleges and universities, businesses, government, and local agencies. And so we start to think, how do you get this language into your respective plans, which then could influence what we think about in terms of resources to advance this work. So College of the Canyons is doing really well. How can we have this language appear in other strategic plans around the state? And what could that look like? Sharing a bit of our plan, we have a 10-year plan right now. And so I'm going to share a little bit of our language that's baked into our plan. Some of the language for us, and you're welcome to beg, borrow, and steal any of this as you think about positioning your language elsewhere. Part of our language is preparing every student to participate in community and civic engagement, helping them gain skills and a broader understanding of their civic responsibilities. We have language here specifically with connecting and working with our local school system. We have specific language about doubling the number of our graduates that are involved in postgraduate service year possibilities here locally. We talk about our law school and their specific language about how they're working with local communities. Other language, our business school, creating a business incubator for local businesses. When we think about our health sciences, it's about launching expanded nursing programs and healthcare certificates. When we think about town-gown relations, there's specific language about partnering with local towns, our town of Elon, the city of Burlington, and surrounding communities. So again, this language has made its way into our plan, which helps me then create a case for why I think about resources that have to go towards the community. And it's not just coming from an office like mine, it's a part of what we've agreed upon in terms of our vision and our strategic direction going forward. Last couple of thoughts before I open things back up. Some of these things that we're doing here on my campus, some of them are easier to replicate and some of them are more challenging. And I realize that, and I've worked at a whole variety of public and private institutions over the past 25 years. One of the things that we're doing that I think really has been a game changer, I'm going to put this out there, and this is difficult to institute on a broad scale, but one never knows what kind of traction you can get. Some of the language from that Chronicle article that I shared earlier talks about the importance of providing more hands-on experiences for students outside of the classroom. We have a requirement that is part of a graduation requirement for us, that whether or not you're studying politics or you're studying physics or chemistry or English, everybody has to complete 2 experiential learning requirements before you graduate. There are 5 different options. Service is one of them, as well as undergraduate research or study abroad, leadership, and internships. So we bake experience in as a graduation requirement. So I have students that are taking my service learning classes called community-based learning classes, or doing service internships with local nonprofits and schools because it's part of the graduation requirement. So that has really helped us move things forward. I've got about 75 academic classes on my campus last year that were working with a community-based learning model in some way, shape, or form. Some of them as simple as students need to have 1 volunteer experience as part of that class. 2, some classes were moving forward with having their students in the community for 20 and 30 hours, working either on site with local nonprofits or working on project-based learning with community organizations. I mentioned the faculty fellow position. We have 2 positions that we're working with my office. One's on civic engagement, one's on community-based learning. Those faculty fellows in our provost office get a course release every semester for a total of 4 years. And it takes them out of the classroom for that 1 class, and it reallocates their time to work with communities and other faculty to help negotiate and move this work forward. We have a variety of scaffolded faculty development opportunities. The really simple one for us is we do a 2-hour workshop that is Community-Based Learning 101. And that's where you can start. In addition to that, we will offer mini grants and partnership grants with communities. We'll offer a cohort program. We offer a small group of faculty $1,000 a year, and my faculty fellow works with that cohort over the course of the year to help them turn an existing course into a community-based learning course. One of the areas that works really well for us is that I have 1 staff member in my office, and she is designed to connect our campus with community organizations. And so the vast majority of her job is spent listening to faculty to find out how their class needs might work with communities, and then to talk with community organizations to find out what their needs are. And then Sarah Beth is a matchmaker between our faculty and our community partners to see how those intersections between classrooms and community can take place. Got a bunch of co-curricular opportunities as well. I know most of you are less likely to be engaged with this, but a university works with community partners, whether that's in the curricular sense or in the volunteer or co-curricular sense. We're often working with the same community partners. We've got about 100 student leaders on our campus. The vast majority of them are unpaid, but what they are doing is they are serving as the coordinators between local schools, nonprofit organizations, and that might be the Boys and Girls Club, that's Habitat for Humanity. But those students are working with those partners to help create volunteer opportunities, and then some faculty are tying in, so they're not having to do that level of work, okay? So I've given you a lot of information, and as we're just hitting 2 o'clock right now, I want you to think about a few things, and then I'm gonna join y'all for some conversation that's gonna follow. But the first few questions I asked all of you were, how does your individual class contribute to the public good, and how could it? And I want to leave you with not just the class model, but I want you to think about your broader institutions. And I want you to zoom out and think, currently, how does your institution contribute to your local communities or the public good? And then ultimately, I want you to start to think about how could they? How could they do it better and on a broader scale and involve more of you in this work? So I know I've given you a lot of content and a lot of questions to think about, but I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing right now and turn things back over to Patty and to Kimberly.
Thank you, Bob. Really, really interesting questions and very thought-provoking, and definitely lots of things to talk about here. We're going to move into our second hour, and I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly, who does the introduction. And that way, I think too, because we're such a small group, Kimberly, I don't know, maybe we could even do this as
Yeah, we can do whatever we want, but maybe we will stay. Sometimes I put people in breakout rooms because sometimes that gives quieter voices, a smaller landscape to talk in. But we can stay as a larger group as well. But this is the document I've been posting in the chat. And it basically is really a place for us to capture some thoughts and some notes, like some of you have done here, which is lovely. And then when we go in breakout rooms or as we're talking, we like to keep some of our initiatives in mind, like guided pathways. But usually we'll have a little note taker here and then someone can report out. But since we are a small group, let's see, we have about 8 of us in the room right now. We could either break into 2 groups of 1 of 3 and 1 of 4, or for 10 minutes and come back, or we can stay a little larger. Do we have a preference, anybody? I'm leaning toward maybe doing breakout rooms simply because some folks we haven't heard from yet in the larger group. So I thought that might just be a little more encouraging for folks to kind of, are you guys okay if we maybe go for 10 minutes in a breakout room? And Bob, I'll put you in a room, and Patty, I'll put you in a room, and I'll be at the hub, or Crystal could be at the hub. But either one of us, because Crystal's with us too on 3CSN, but I can stay at the hub and manage things. Why don't we give that a try and then and see. So let me quickly do the breakout rooms. I'm going to do 2 rooms. And I'm going to literally assign randomly. So let's see. So I got Bob, Crystal, Ethan, and Naomi in the first room. And I've got Anna, Delbar, and Patty in the second room. And then maybe I can pop Crystal around between.
And also, yeah, and if you'd like, Kimberly, I know you held down the fort last time and I got to go into a breakout room. So if you want, you can go in and I can stay out here.
Okay, excellent. Why don't you stick me in room 1 then? And then, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, let's spread that love. Okay.
Wait, do I have you as a co-host? No.
Not yet. Yeah,
Give me a
bring me
minute.
out.
Okay, the rest of you, oh, I haven't opened the rooms yet. Here we go. Open all rooms. Okay, Crystal, are you able to move me?
Let's see. I'm gonna put you in. You want to do room?
One, also that Patty and I are different rooms.
Yeah, I can move. Nope, I do not see you. You're gonna have to go into your own room. You're because
Okay.
you're host. You're not.
Oh, I'll just join. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll join.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
All right,
Thanks.
10 minutes.
Yeah, let's do like between 10 and 15.
Okay, I'll do 13.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good. All
right.
right.
Okay, Bob, you have to finish your point. He was in the middle of this really good example.
No, Kimberly had a great idea about, how do you connect a printmaking class with the community? And so I was mid-thought, and so we're just giving Naomi some ideas. We had a professor from our communications department reach out and say, listen, we know that Elon helps sponsor the Special Olympics event every year in the spring, and that we create posters. We need 300 volunteers to run it. Well, that class created all of our Special Olympics media and PR work. And so those students worked with us and with the community partner. It was a low stakes activity, but we're using all their posters across campus. And so, that student skill set, I would love to have 2% of those designer printmaking skills. But how do you take those students to say, let's help you create something that we need anyway? And it becomes a win-win. So we just did that, and those posters look really cool this semester.
So, sorry, I was listening. I was getting too too engaged in the example.
I know I was getting ready to say, okay, do we continue with our group or do we go on to the second room? I think we're small enough. Everyone can just please feel free to like unmute and just add. Patty or anyone else from the other group want to share a little?
Well, we had Anna and Delbar in our group, and I'm happy to make a few comments, but I'd love to have either of them share. They had some really good ideas as well. They're being shy, so I'll jump in. But I did recruit both of them to become part of our steering committee, so that is really good. So I think it was interesting, Bob. We were talking because all of us are from College of the Canyons, and while our campus has done amazing things at the institutional level, where we are struggling is how do you bring this down to the class level? And there have been a whole variety of reasons of why that's been problematic. One of which is that when we used to have a very strong service learning program, but then the issue of liability and having to have contracts for all of our agencies and all of this, it just became, it was just too complicated. And so we actually then moved over to project-based learning. But now the problem is how do you get faculty involved to do this work, even though a lot of them are doing some aspects of project-based learning in their classes, because again, a lot of folks will say, well, I don't have the time. I don't, I'm already doing this. I just can't do it. So we talked about this from the institutional level. There is definitely that support. I mean, you saw it in the strategic plan. All of that was changed about a year and a half ago. Yes, we've got that support. It's there. We've got it in our mission, vision, all of that. But there's the other part when you start to drill down. Are we actually walking the talk when it comes down to the course level? And I think this is where there's a disconnect, because our campus is doing some amazing things. But again, we're missing the problem of framing and naming it. So when you're using the term civic engagement, we've struggled with this for years. People go, huh? They think it's only voting. They think it's political. So I guess where I'm going with all of this was a great conversation because we were trying to kind of brainstorm what is needed. And definitely there is that connection of if we're going to get faculty involved, we have to have that connection at that course level that's going to get our institution saying, yeah, we are ready to focus and support faculty.
I want to throw a couple of ideas, y'all can take or leave these. We talked about, given the fact that y'all are already at the College of the Canyons, one thing that's been really affordable and it's gotten a lot of energy for our faculty is a simple community of practice. And we've done them on different topics, and it's to help everybody in the English department do community-based learning. It's to help. So, I mean, it's literally paying for a cup of coffee for people one time a month, 3 times a semester. And the idea is you start to get people together in person like we're doing right now and start to say, what could this look like? Crystal shares, I've tried this and it didn't work. Kimberly's like, have you thought about this? Naomi says, well, I'm thinking about trying this. Where might I go with this? And so that simple once a month community of practice is a simple way to gather people in person to trade ideas and offer support for each other. So that's a simple thing. Another thing that you might want to think about, in way back in the day, Wake Forest University did this on a small scale. They got a couple of bucks, and they put together a call, and they said, we're gonna offer a financial incentive for 3 faculty members this year. We're gonna give you $500, $1,000 to infuse this in a course. And so they met over the course of the year, and they created a cohort of 3. Well, the next year, that cohort of 3 mentored the next cohort of 3. And so literally you're doing 3 people a year to start to build momentum. And it could be as simple as starting with 3 of you that are on the Zoom today on a really simple level. Last thing I'll throw in is that, we get a very modest external grant every year. And to start to get new faculty in the game, we've got a grant, and we offer $500 for a faculty member in the first year to take an existing class and add a community piece and apply for a community-based learning designation. So we're going to help you take what you're already doing, add 1 community piece to it, and that becomes a part of what you do. And then the second year, we're going to give you another $500, and we're going to say, we want you to teach it that way and assess it and let us know how it goes. So those little incentives, A, financial, but B, gathering people together to trade ideas and energy, those simple things can really have a lot of momentum, especially because the stuff is already baked into your strategic plan. You're helping the university move it forward. So you're doing them a favor.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea, Bob. And it's funny because I think we've kind of approached it in a little bit different way. And I can honestly say it hasn't been as strategic as it could have been. So I think that, there's a lot of reflection that we're doing. Let's put it that way right now. This is all really good. And as I said, just in general, we have so many wonderful things happening on our campus that we can talk about that really do fit into this larger framework. But a lot of folks don't understand or think in those terms. And I think, again, it's how do you get that message out there?
Yeah, and I just want to add to it. I love the idea of like the coffee and getting people together for so many reasons. Number one, we're all still a little disconnected from this pandemic. And I think people, once they do get to kind of connect again, appreciate that and appreciate time to have conversations about what they love to do and what we're in the classroom for a reason. We like this. We enjoy it. We want to do creative and fun things. I mean, it needs a leader. It needs someone to say, hey, we're going to be here at this time, this place, and someone who's going to consistently show up, even if only one other person does. But if it gets momentum, the advantage is, and I was sharing this with Bob in our group, these things have to be faculty driven, I feel. The minute they become top down and a requirement, then faculty tend to not like that. They tend to push back against that. Even if it might be a really good thing. So I think when you start small and you maybe start with coffee chats and you can kind of build from there and find ways to do the work and scale the work within the means. So, like Naomi was sharing, it just seems like a lot of work and unpaid labor. And I agree with that in terms of like, we can't take it to that level if there isn't support for it in terms of course release or something, but there are small ways that this can happen too. It doesn't have to be like this big thing. It can start small. Like Patty, you have a very, challenging situation at College of the Canyons that we just didn't run into at Cerritos. If I wanted to do things with a community member, I needed no contracts. I needed nothing. They literally said, you're okay as long as the students aren't doing it during your class at the very same time your class meets. You don't need any of these contracts or anything in place. I don't think that's true if like I'm putting someone in a K-12 classroom because you need like fingerprinting and so like this is different, but like if it's just like a basic, hey, you guys are really interested in the unhoused, why don't you go check out this local organization because they're serving some food on Saturday and maybe you could like, interview them or interview the population or help out or whatever. If I were to do that with students, Cerritos they say that's fine. You don't need a contract for that. So I think lifting some of those barriers and maybe getting into like, where do we need the contracts and where can we lift them? So it makes it easy for the students and the faculty to encourage this kind of thing. And I think that, again, if you bring people together and you could talk about the challenges, how to address them, and the workarounds to make it happen, you know, maybe some of this will get moved a little bit faster and a little bit more widespread. But it's a slow burn. It's like you start with a small group, and then if it's successful, it builds from there. That's at least how I would see it, even at Cerritos. And we started that, Patty, with our Bringing Theory to Practice grant. I was sharing in the room, one of our printmakers made some amazing posters as a result of that grant, but they were paid a little honorarium, and I had money to bring food. So I'd bring them in, I'd feed them lunch, and they got an honorarium for attending the meetings and then having some kind of end product, an assignment, an activity, something. And it was great. It was really great because I had people from art and from English and from counseling. So it brought together people from across campus who all had an interest in doing this. And it was just such a great kind of time. And then of course we went into the pandemic because the posters they made in printmaking were about COVID-19 public health stuff, which was before like the vaccines even, but still it was a great thing. But I do think that, you know, if we could get people together in a room, and sometimes face-to-face would be nice too, like the coffee thing, Bob, get out of the Zoom world and get them, you know, hey, we're going to be at the coffee shop at 4 o'clock on Mondays, come swing by. I think it's just great ideas. I'm wondering what other people think. Crystal.
Yeah, I didn't get to go into a breakout room, but I've been thinking about it while y'all were gone. You know, I run a tutoring center, and we've made several attempts to get our tutors out to LAUSD specifically, but also to kind of make connections in communities where it makes sense to them. I've got, for example, a business tutor right now who really wants to do an internship, right? And I'm trying to help her find an internship in business and marketing, and we're having a hard time other than going to the Career Transfer Center. And so this has come up several times for us. Like, how do we get, I mean, we've got these amazing people with all this amazing energy and want this amazing experience because they want amazing jobs and go to amazing graduate schools. And so like, it's just rife. It's perfect for this. And after a couple of these, I really started asking more questions about just sort of like, how do we get our tutors out to high schools? How do we connect them with internships? And I keep getting met with this like liability concern, which I don't, is that a thing? Like, I have not heard anything about a liability concern, but I don't know if that's something that other people have connected with. But because they're taking a class with me, you know, a lot of people are concerned about, well, if I send them out into the community, you know, where's the liability lie? So I'm wondering if maybe somebody with a little bit more experience could cover that. And also specifically what I was wondering, and school's only okay, is if we got a club together, is that, like, I was thinking maybe if we can't do it through our like official job as tutors, right? Like, or in our classrooms, has anybody started clubs for these kinds of things? And does that sort of like change the landscape or I guess my question is, how do you get students more involved with this without getting administration to tell you that you're going to get in trouble for liability issues? Anybody have any experience with that?
I want to stop talking, but I have the example.
Yeah, me too.
We had, so there was a group of students who did get in a minor car accident on the way to a site. Wasn't in my class, but it was someone in my department. And so I got to learn more about liability and everything because, of course, I was chairing the department. So the faculty came to me and said, oh my gosh, what do I do? The students have been in thank goodness nobody was hurt, but they've been in a minor car accident on the way to do my community service project. And then I had to talk to the powers that be at the college who said, and that's where I learned that the college was not liable because the students were not on class time. That was the distinction. And it was if that instructor would have said, okay, I'm going to dismiss class today, and during our class meeting, you're going to go do your community service, then the college would have been liable. Or if the instructor would have been in the car with them, which I don't know why she would have been, but if she would have been in the car with them, it would have been problematic. But since it was on the student time, we were told, and this went through legal and everything because of the situation, that we were perfectly, liability-wise, perfectly fine. And that was it. That's the last I heard of it. And again, but no one was injured. This was not dramatic, right? It was a minor car accident. So, but, you know, Patty has a very different story. So I don't know what is true and what is not, because we're just, you know, like an hour away from each other, our two colleges. So we're both in Southern California. So I do know with the schools, last thing, they've got to have the fingerprints and they've got to have the live scan. I do know that's for sure with any kind of schooling. But
Yeah,
if it's just
you're
like
dealing with minors, yeah.
yeah, if it's a community organization beyond that, or maybe after school programs would probably fall in that too. But other than that, I don't, I've had, anyway, I'll let you give your example now, Patty. I'll stop.
No, I was just going to say I'm sitting here shaking my head because I think part of it is that there isn't a consistent kind of model, if you will. All I can tell you is that when we finally had to make a decision not to go with service learning anymore because of the liability and our contract services department, and granted, I think we may be hyper sort of contract in the sense of making sure that there isn't anything that goes wrong. And I mean, there's a place for that. But unfortunately, when this all happened, I actually was on a phone conversation because I was at a conference with two of our folks from contracts, along with our legal person representing the college. And I even asked, well, what if a student wants to go interview someone? You're interested in finding out, oh, I want to find out more about what it means to be a social worker. I want to go over to the local hospital and there's a person working I can interview. Oh no, we need a contract. And so I kept saying, this is just defeating everything, to try and get people to learn. And finally, it was like, this is craziness. So now if there is someone who recommends, and I don't even know what happens in a lot of classes, just from folks I've talked with, if it's like you're going to go and talk to somebody, just you're doing it on your own. I just don't need to know about it. And it just, again, it's defeating this purpose of making those kinds of connections with our community, particularly our nonprofits. And our nonprofits, quite frankly, are struggling. And there's not this connection. Why aren't we trying to build these connections more closely? We do it great with our business community, but there's that part with the nonprofits that's become much more problematic. And that's just me. That's just what I've encountered.
Does student government have the same limits on working with the community? Because student government does this sort of thing. I think more.
It's funny, Crystal, I forgot you wrote that question about a club. So I will just tell you, in the case, I advise both club and I also have two what I call action teams. I've purposely called them action teams because it provides a lot more flexibility. But if you will have a club, you have to abide by very rigid guidelines. Now, if we were to have students go to a site as part of our club, we have a club called Golden Z. It's part of Zonta. We would have to do a fieldwork request. We have to go and do all the paperwork because, again, those students are going to an outside site. The Action Club, when the students went over to help register the folks at our shelter, they went. I didn't have to worry. So I probably would get in trouble if somebody knew that. But, they went over to help the students. We also had a student who another time, she provided an art instruction lesson for the clients. And it couldn't have been more fun. So, it's just very interesting when you start looking at these differences.
I'm wondering, like, Crystal, like, in the high schools, they have something called the Key Club, and it turns into, maybe it's Circle K at the college level. It's the service club. I think it does. I'm wondering, even looking into if you have one in existence, and B, who the advisor is, and maybe kind of partnering, because I know those students, about a gazillion years ago, a long time ago, I was the advisor of the Key Club, and we had over 200 students in that club. I mean, there was such interest in getting out into the community. And it was like some of the most amazing young people I've ever worked with through that club. Now, that was minors, so that was a whole different ballgame, right? I had to do a lot of stuff to help facilitate what they did. I don't think I attended all of their services with them, but there was paperwork and so on. But I know that club translates to the college and university level. that the students can continue who start in high school. And I think it's Circle K, and you should see, like, do we have a Circle K club? And, who is that advisor, or what would it be like if I wanted to create a Circle K club on campus, and maybe go that avenue? Because you're right, maybe there are some, I know for sure there is financial support for our clubs. And so that's kind of nice too, because that might, enable some more things. So it's definitely an avenue to consider.
I think just to add, if community engagement is in your mission and vision statement, I think it's a fair question to say, well, then how are we covered in being able to do this? I know that we work a lot with our risk management office. And so, we've got this university insurance policy that covers students if they're on campus or off campus. But when I just had a quick peek at the College of the Canyons majors, when you have majors like nursing and education and such, those students are engaging with things off campus. So what blanket policy does your institution have when students are engaging off campus? And that could be, to Crystal's point, for clubs, but also, our nursing students and education students. Is this work already covered in other areas on campus and people just haven't delved into it yet?
So my response to that, Bob, would be, my understanding is that the nursing department would have its own contracts set up with its different organizations, its sites. And then with the same thing with our early childhood education department, that they have their own separate contracts. But I even think ECE has been affected by a lot of these changes with, the very stringent rules as well. So there isn't, to my understanding, any sort of blanket policy.
Okay.
I mean, just if they could somehow lift that, Patty, I'll just give you an example. When I was doing this in the classroom at Cerritos, I would have the students find their own organizations, and I would give them parameters around that. And I always had them go in groups. I said I didn't want them going alone. They found the most amazing places in our local community around their interests to give their time. We have a really large park near us called El Dorado Park. And at El Dorado Park, I learned, for those of our students who are really into animals and animal welfare, they have a pet literacy program where they take, like, the pets that are in the pound, the strays, and the students, people can go read to them, and they go read to the animals. I was like blown away. I was blown away that this even existed, and the students loved it. But these are the ones who, like, we want to do something with animals. We got into liability at the sites because the students, like, needed tetanus, and if they were going to go to, like, a vet, thing, wasn't really with Cerritos, but more the site. So I tell them, if you have that kind of thing, you got to find something different. And they found this literacy nonprofit run out of the park, and I would share it with other students, but I never facilitated and got in the way, other than if they were having trouble, right? And then you got, when like volunteer.org, volunteer match came in, like, that was like the best thing ever. Cause I would always say, you guys got to find your own, like, I had these males, a group of all males, who went to a retirement home and played bingo with the retirees in the home, and took pictures of it, and just had this transformative experience. And none of that, I didn't need contracts. I just, the students they went as a group, they represented Cerritos. We talked about how to behave and to do things. And they just had these great, transformative, really cool experiences. And then I learned, we got all these cool, like, things, like, within a 10-mile radius of our college that students can do. And we did beach cleanup, some of them, and some of them are doing, like, homelessness, and some of them are doing the animals. And I think there was, like, a pet, like a bunny rescue somewhere in Downey. And, like, these students found this bunny rescue. So, like, if the college allows for it, the students could have this, like, amazing, rich, collaborative time finding their organization, and then also going and just having these, like, really transformative experiences, right? And then that does take a little off of, the labor for the faculty, because from the start, I would say, you guys got to find your own, but I want you to find 5 of them, and I want you to report out on them to us. And I want, I had then I would keep a notebook of them. And then if a student's really got in a pinch, but that was all pre-volunteer match. Once volunteer match came in, it was like, oh my word, the world just opened up. And it was like, amazing. And so I just never had like a labor issue on my side other than like crafting the assignment and following it through its stages and helping to troubleshoot here and there. But that was going to happen anyway in my classes if they were working in groups. So that's what I mean by when you get people together, you can kind of like talk through like, how can we get around some of these barriers? Because there are ways. And I'll tell you, those days of teaching those, and I want to get back to it, I loved it as a faculty member, and the students, I mean, literally were just beaming when it came time to talk about these issues. It was so different than when I used to just send them to the library and say, go research animal welfare. And they would come in with this boring kind of like, okay, here's animal welfare. Now it was like, oh my gosh, we went and read to these dogs and these cats. And it was like, oh my gosh. So I don't know. I think it's worth having the conversation and maybe revisiting some of those, Patty. And like if anyone else is having those kind of struggles, to revisit the conversations and say, let's talk about what is possible and, you know, where we have to draw the line with the contracts and all that. And I know ECE is one of them. I know ed and I know nursing is. And I did like, but I know like law, like, you know, there's a free legal service. I had a law student who wanted to participate and help out, and she did that. You know, her group did that. So anyway, I think there's workarounds is my point. And maybe I was violating all kinds of things that I shouldn't have been, but nobody told me. I didn't know any better. And I think we were all better off for it. So I definitely think it's worth those conversations.
And I think you're right. I think it's time to revisit this and maybe have a sit down with our contract services people, because it has become so prohibitive. It's crazy making. And unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, I think fortunately, I'm guessing a lot of faculty are probably doing a lot of this, and you know, people just don't know. And so I don't want to open up a can of worms, but at the same time, I want to make sure that if people want to do this, I mean, even having what you just described, Kimberly, the way that it was conveyed to me, I wouldn't even be able to do that, which was, again, I'm going, that's silly. But I do think it's time to have a revisit this conversation.
It goes back to that partnership we were talking about, Bob, between the faculty and the administration. You need the administration to help you remove the barriers, right? To say, here's what we want to do. Faculty are interested. We can do great things, but I have barrier A, B, C, and D. And how can you help me smooth the way, right?
Yep, I understand. We have these little mini partnerships that faculty can apply for to work with a partner. And one of the deliverables, and I'm going to drop it in the chat, is that we ask faculty to put together a brief story for our university website to start to let people know what they're doing. And so when people start to say, wow, that class worked with that organization and did that, that's really cool. It lets the administration know this is what could be happening. And it lets other faculty know, I could do that, or I've got someone to talk to now to reach out to do that. And so those little mini grants, it's a little deliverable, but it's designed to really share some of those stories. And also to start to really leverage our administrators to say, how could we have more people doing this? And I know that some people see this as an add-on, but I think when you start to do this in your class, you get to the point where you say, I can't teach it the old way. I mean, to Kimberly's point, I'm not going to send them back to the library to do research and come back with dull presentations, because I know how engaging these presentations can be when they're doing real experiences. And so it just becomes a part of how you teach it. And it's hard to go back to the old way sometimes.
Yep.
Well, I know we have about 10 minutes left, and just curious if there are other comments, ideas, things that really sparked your interest today in listening to Bob's presentation.
I'll tell you, I'm so inspired. I added your link here, Bob, to our shared Google Doc. I'm putting in a session assessment if folks would take a moment to fill that out. But I really appreciate the way you kind of framed all of this today in terms of like the crisis of higher ed. And then kind of like we have a solution in front of us, right? And the thing is, like, I bet we are doing this, Patty. A lot of people are doing it. It's
Mhm.
just, you got to bring them together and you got to find a way to have that sharing and to see the value in it. I know our students do see the value in it when they do it. I think our faculty would, if they understood it wasn't going to cost them, 25 hours of time, right? That they could do this in ways that integrate in their curriculum or take away from their curriculum. It can enhance what you're already doing. And I think that's one of my takeaways today too, is like just keeping that message out there that, it doesn't have to be an either or. It could
Exactly.
be a combo. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this was great. Anybody else have a comment before we end? Well, Bob, I wanted to just say the same thing that Kimberly just did with regard to framing this. I think this was great. Putting it within this larger context of what's happening in higher education, and just showing that this is so needed, and that I think this is one way that we can hopefully bridge some of those gaps that just seem to be getting bigger or wider and wider. And so I think the more that we can get that message out there, it's also incredibly important as well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the invitation, Patty. And I think the more that we can do to help take our institutions and have them be forces to help create stronger communities, I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. And it gets students excited, it gets faculty excited, it re-engages the public with why we exist in the first place. And so I don't think it's rocket science. I think it's just doing a little bit of twisting to say, why do we exist and how can we do things a little bit differently?
I agree. And I hope folks know, again, as I was saying, when we look at our institutional objectives particularly at our college, we have done some amazing, amazing things. But if you're starting to, as I said, drill down, that's where, again, I think we've got to kind of go back and figure this out where we can get it to work and get more voices on board with this. So I really appreciate this discussion. I think it's been it's been very eye-opening in the sense of sort of reevaluating and reflecting. So I want to say again, thank you very much, Bob.
Take care. Hope you all have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
Bye,
Bye-bye,
everyone.
Bob.
Thank you. Take care of yourselves. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.